Hey guys, I'm Lee Taylor. That's the 2021 Hyundai Kona Electric, and this is a Right Lane review. If we look back over the not too distant past, we have had some incredible petrol-burning, tire-spinning rocket machines on the channel, but the opposite of these is not a villain, but rather an automotive angel. This is obviously no Taycan, but it is a small, friendly SUV with plenty of practicality and usable range. Plus, it costs way less than $100,000 and has a reliable brand name attached to it. We also know that electric cars are the future, and it's cars like this brand new refreshed Kona Electric which will lead that mainstream charge. Pun intended. So unless you've been living under a rock the last few years, you should know that electric cars are no longer just golf carts with license plates and seat belts. They're actually come a long way, and this Kona is no exception. Being based on the normal Kona, it feels pretty at home as a typical small SUV. And if you want to know what the normal Kona is like, you can check out our review we did a few weeks ago by clicking on one of the banners here on the screen. But overall, the Kona Electric, when you're just driving it out and about on the surface roads or day-to-day life, feels very normal. By the fact that you don't get an engine noise, it makes commuting pretty easy. You get in it, most of the controls are typical Kona controls. You do have a shift-by-wire system now instead of the shift lever that you would have in a traditional Kona, but that's nothing unusual because Hyundai's kind of putting that in everything they're doing. When you sit in it, it feels normal. There's nothing out of the ordinary. It's a bit more responsive because it's electric and it's a lot more quiet in here. It's easy to park, easy to see out of, and just easy to drive. It's got all the Hyundai safety sense, and you only have two specs in the Hyundai Electric, which is the Elite, which is a very well spec'd version of the Kona, and then you have the Highlander, which is what this is, which has heated seats, cooled seats, Harman Kardon stereo, all the extra sensors, and you do get safety sense, adaptive cruise control, all of that. So pretty normal Hyundai. When things change is when you get to dynamics and how the car actually responds, because electric cars kind of present a different dynamic problem. You have a battery pack that's a lot heavier, but you've also now lost this gyrating, vibrating piece of metal sitting in the front of the engine. So if you pop the bonnet open on this car, you'll find that there is still quite a lot of technology in there, but it's not nearly as much as before, and it's not an engine. It's an electric motor with all of its control modules, and it actually makes it feel pretty empty in there, which means the nose of the car is actually a little bit lighter. The car itself isn't that much lighter than the normal Kona, but because of where all the weight is, it feels a bit different in the hands. And the car offers 4 different modes for your driving pleasure, if you will. You have Eco and Eco Plus reducing some of the actions the car can make in order to save range, normal mode, which is what I've been driving the car around in for most of the time, and Sport, which really sharpens up the throttle response, gives you all the available power out of the electric motor, and toughens up the steering. Now, I'm not a massive fan of the heavy steering, but it does what it does. And the Hyundais tend to tune themselves really well for the Australian market, so the car feels nice. Now, what the difference is that punchiness out of electric motor. As soon as you put your foot down in any electric car, and the Kona is no exception, you get an instant surge of torque. So, in equivalent to a petrol engine, this car makes 150 kilowatts, which isn't a lot of power. It's only 3 kilowatts more than the inline, and it's about 50 kilowatts off of the in-performance Kona. But where this car makes its bread and butter is in the torque, because an electric motor can create torque from 1 RPM. This car makes 397 newton meters of torque. 397 newton meters of torque in a small SUV is a lot of power. It's actually just slightly more torque than in the in-performance Kona, and about 130 newton meters more torque than in the inline all-wheel drive Kona. So it makes a massive difference. And you can get wheel spin in sport mode at any speed, which is a little bit unnerving, but really cool, which means the car is responsive in any scenario. And that kind of gives us enthusiasts something to play with. And you're probably wondering, if you're driving like that, you're probably not getting a great range. Well, the car actually has a pretty good range. WLTP cycle is about 480 kilometers. And I could definitely see that being a reality, because I picked the car up and it said it had about 450 kilometers. Still have 350 kilometers on the dash, and I've been driving this car around town for quite some time. And around town, it is actually more efficient than out on the freeway because the motor's not working as hard or as often. Charge time is a little bit different for the Kona. They've really improved how quickly the Kona can get its battery power up. So in a wall socket, you're looking at about 9.5 hours, which is about 20 minutes quicker than it used to be. On a DC fast charger, the 50-watt one, you're looking at 10% to 80% in less than an hour, which is amazing. And on a 100-watt fast charger, you're looking at 10% to 80% in 45 minutes, which is really good. We charged the Ioniq a similar rate last year when we were in Brunswick, and I reckon the cars sit at home for anywhere from 8 to 9 hours anyway, so you should be able to get a good charge overnight. And 480 kilometers of range is on par with a petrol engine. So there's really nothing bad about having an electric car. There's no big downside to having the electric Kona. The only downside is lack of charging infrastructure, which we're working on. So if you don't have a place to charge the car at home, you do have to think about where you're going to charge it during the week. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But beyond that, this is the future, and the car feels very normal, and I think that's perfect because we want cars to feel normal, so people buy them. That's great. So how's the interior on the Kona Electric? Well, it's based on the typical Kona, and this Highlander model particularly is just like the Highlander that we had before. If you want to check out that review, we'll have a link above. There's a few things that are a bit different. One's these nice gray seats with this beautiful blue stitching. We have a normal Kona steering wheel, but the paddle shifters are there not to shift gears, but to adjust the regenerative braking. A gorgeous, beautiful digital driver's display, heads-up display, center stack, which is a little bit different because you have the shift-by-wire functions and the buttons for your heated, cooled seats, heated steering wheel and drive modes are all here in the bottom. Plenty of cubbies, wireless charging, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. Yeah, it's typical Kona. It's a nice place to be. So what's the tops, bottoms, and final verdict for the 2021 Hyundai Kona Electric? Well, on the bottom are a few things that most electric cars suffer from. One is the fact that we don't have the greatest charging infrastructure here in Australia, so we're still trying to build and catch up to the rest of the world. Cars like this that are in this small SUV class tend to be a bit XC in price. This one's $66,000, so with on-roads, it gets kind of expensive. And overall, it's a good looking car, but for me personally, her face gives me a little bit of Alien versus Predator. So what's on top for the Kona Electric? Well, overall, it's a pretty normal car, which is high praise considering the platform that it's on, and it feels like any other Kona, so you're not really missing anything. Plus, the electric platform means you get incredibly responsive, punchy, and smooth power delivery, and it's almost silent, which is really cool. And overall, it's the future of the automotive world, and it's a pretty cool place to be. So what's my final verdict on the 2021 Hyundai Kona Electric? Well, overall, it is a typical Hyundai, which means it's a super well packaged small SUV, and it feels incredibly normal, which proves that electric cars can be normal. So if this is the future, count me in. The one thing that you do notice is that because it's so quiet, on occasion you'll spook a pedestrian if you're in a little small back street.